Hello, Internet. Taliesin here, and today we are talking Sylvanas and Saurfang, Thrall, the Siege of Orgrimmar, the other Siege of Orgrimmar, and the climax of the Battle for Azeroth war campaign in patch 8.2.5, because the Fourth War has ended. The dust has settled, some questions have been answered, some have been left tantalizingly open, and okay, yeah, so everything happened to the letter exactly as I predicted it would, but that's hardly a surprise these days, and we will be looking closely at all of the twists and turns of this final act of what is essentially the B-plot of the expansion in this video as we analyse those two big juicy cinematics that formed a part of it. Traitors Assemble and Reckoning. And if you've never seen one of these cinematic analysis videos of ours, then let me give you a big old warning, right? Because this is not a reaction video, okay? I've personally played through the 8.2.5 war campaign 3 times as Alliance, Saurfang Traitor Horde, and Sylvanas Loyalist. I've watched these two main cinematics something like 30 to maybe 100 times each, and if you haven't seen them, this is a terrible way to watch them for the first time, because we're going to be stopping and starting, talking all over the top of them, going back over bits, and generally just geeking out over what is, in my opinion, some pretty awesome stuff. And some stuff that left me wanting a bit more too. Is it a satisfying ending to the war campaign? Does it make sense for the characters involved? Did the different Horde loyalty choices pay off? And what does it mean for the Forsaken, the Horde, the Alliance, the in-game playable factions, and the future of World of Warcraft as a whole? That's a lot to talk about, isn't it? Yes, it is. Let's get started. Join us as we take a cinematic deep dive into Traitors Assemble and Reckoning and ask, is the cycle finally broken? And what is Sylvanas' grand plan for 8.3? Okay, go, 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 go.
Anduin. Sylvanas' actions have threatened us all.
So whoever you are and whatever side you fight for, this final part of the war campaign begins with the player being relayed a message, a retelling of a rendezvous between the Alliance and Saurfang's rebel boys, and has all the secretive cloak and dagger feels that you might imagine. The opening image of a hooded King of Stormwind, perfectly disguised and unrecognisable were it not for his literally gold and silver royal horse, Anduin clearly saving war resources by not splashing out on the incognito horse armor DLC, very thrifty, I like it. Galloping urgently through Dustwallow Marsh with Valeera and Shaw under the cover of a cloudy, moonless night and rain. There's a literal thunder and lightning storm kicking off. The storm that has been brewing this entire expansion is about to hit, and these three are on their way to play their part in it. The damp and drizzle also adds to the general feeling of dishevelment that is a pervading theme throughout this cinematic, as we'll see. This is no grand army that they're going to meet, but a ragtag force which will be outnumbered, the overcast weather almost representing the downcast mood of every character in this rebel horde camp, which we see approaching from the merry band's point of view and could quite easily be mistaken for a refugee camp. Such is the feeling of it being cobbled together, much like this new alliance itself. What's unusual about this cinematic though in Warcraft terms is that it opens with a voiceover.
Anduin.
Saurfang reading aloud a letter that he has sent to Anduin. The only other WoW cinematic I can think of that starts this way is the Legion trailer, where we hear King Varian reading aloud a letter he is writing to Anduin. Something about the beautiful angel-faced crying boy, who is weirdly even more attractive when he cries, attracts gruff father figures who are compelled to impart their sage advice by the written word, obviously. This is the first of quite a few parallels between Varian and Saurfang in the war campaign finale. And look, no spoilers, okay, but we know how it worked out for Varian after he finished his letter to Anduin at the Broken Shore, and also, weirdly, lost his shoulder pads. Anyway, I'm sorry, this intro bit is a bit long, but you know one of my especially geeky kinks is that when a location in one of these in-game cinematics pops up, I like to try and work out exactly where in the game the assets are taken from. I like to know these things because I'm basically a tragic human being, and this is clearly Dustwallow Marsh. It would make sense that Anduin and co would arrive in Kalimdor via the remains of Theramore, and it's kind of on the way for the Horde forces making their way from Mulgore too. And I think this particular tower is North Point Tower, after taking a bit of a recent battering and cleared of its pesky Alliance inhabitants and the surrounding trees. The view from the window that we see later has the same pattern of marsh going through it, and the cobbled road is also the same. Just thought you'd like to know that, and it took me about an hour to find, so yeah, hope it was interesting.
And day by day, her power grows. If our world is to survive, we must strike while we still can.
And as Saurfang continues his voiceover, talking sadly about Sylvanas' growing power and how they will need to work together, Saurfang's musical theme is played underneath, in first elongated and then minor notes to add to the tension as Bane and Jaina, bathed in the red and blue of the two factions, stand side by side and welcome the king as a united front, the axe resting unheld on the wall to show the peace that exists in this place between the two warring factions. And Anduin follows suit, handing his own weapon to Valeera, who, by the way, is outrageously hot in this cinematic with her new model, obviously, but don't worry, because I'm not going to bang on about that, and making his way up the roofless, unprotected tower to make his rendezvous. And as always, we are introduced to a major character in one of these cinematics from behind. But whereas Anduin's first encounter in one of these cinematics with Saurfang in Lost Honor gave us our first glimpses of the orc appearing like a savage, caged beast, here he is, still, pensive, dignified, lost in thought. The relationship between these two has changed immeasurably, despite this being the first time they've met since the Stockades. And as Anduin takes his place beside Saurfang and looks down on the gathered rebel boy forces, we are reminded of Old Soldier and how Zekhan joins the veteran orc in looking out at the fires of the opposing forces in the crisp early dawn. How long ago that seems, how strong and proud both armies were back then at the beginning of the war, how strong and tall the walls of Lordaeron stood in comparison to this crumbling tower. How much has changed since this war began.
So few.
How many can you provide?
Enough for one final assault. If that fails, we're done.
And as the two leaders talk, they barely look at each other. Their minds are clearly completely focused on the daunting task ahead, the serious lack of numbers that they have to win this fight with. Until Anduin fixes Saurfang with a steady gaze, because he has a very important question.
What kind of Warchief will you be?
To me, this is a lot like the England scene in Macbeth, where the old soldier Macduff asks the same of the Prince Malcolm. The fact that here the roles are reversed and it's the younger character asking someone 3 times his age helps show the maturity and confidence that Anduin has found throughout this campaign. Something we see quite a lot of, and he holds that stare. This isn't small talk, he demands an answer, and Saurfang could give the wrong answer. And in fact, Saurfang's answer is somewhat unexpected.
The Horde I joined was birthed in blood, tainted by corruption.
His motif plays sadly underneath as he gets angry, thinking about the history of the Horde. He punches the wall and puts his face towards Anduin, just like in Lost Honor, but whereas there he was saying, "I want my Horde back." By now, he has clearly lost all faith in the Horde, insisting that it never had any honour at all, and actually Sylvanas is quite a fitting leader of the faction given her bloodthirsty legacy. This is a major crisis of confidence from the leader, doubting his entire cause and basically having a bit of a wobbly. And this all comes, of course, from Saurfang's own tragedy, his own guilty part in the Horde's dark beginnings, in his continued cursed failure to die an honourable warrior's death, while those younger and better of heart around him do. This lingering shot of his dead son's pendant, and this line,
I've never known honor,
summoning up all of his sadness. And basically, it again falls to Daddy Anduin to be the calm, level-headed one.
The Horde has no exclusive claim to regrets. Arthas, Dalen, the ghosts of the past haunt us as well.
And this is another sign of a newfound maturity from Anduin. He doesn't pretend that the Alliance is a bastion of good, lists some of their own shames, but he believes in the Horde, in the goodness of it.
we could not fill the chasm between the Horde and Alliance if we labored 1,000 years. You know this.
Then what are we fighting for?
And you know what? It's just possible that in this one short speech, in this moment, Anduin Wrynn has actually saved the Horde and what it stands for. Because if the King of the Alliance can believe so strongly in the honor of the Horde, then surely Saurfang can too. As the BFA battle music starts to play, Saurfang takes up that axe that we saw languishing earlier as they march out of the tower and bellows,
"Soldiers, on your feet!"
This fight is on. The four foreground figures here, red, blue, red, blue. The Horde and Alliance are now well and truly working together, and we get this really cool shot of the rebel Horde leaders standing up looking badass. Including Rexxar, because Rexxar is here completely inexplicably, and okay, that's cool, I'm down with that. The unusualness of this unity is highlighted by our favourite zappy boy, Zekhan. When Anduin barks an order of his own, the young troll's instinct is not to obey it, but to turn to his own leader. And Saurfang, sense of purpose and fight restored by the King of Stormwind, just as his literal freedom was in an earlier cinematic, gets all philosophical on his young protege.
Zekhan, where is our home?
Orgrimmar?
Oh god, Zappy is such a dweeb. And Saurfang places his massive paw on Zappy's shoulder in that fatherly way that he does in Old Soldier, and Zappy finally sees the light.
Not our city. Our home.
Azeroth.
As does Auntie Jaina.
And ours?
Azeroth.
Here is what unites the two factions. Here is what they have in common. The thing that goes beyond the wars and the grudges and the battles and the killing. The world on which they live. This is literally their common ground. And God, I know I said I wouldn't mention it, but honestly, Valeera's new model really is smoking. It's actually a little bit silly. Anyway, as this stirring speech reaches its climax, we see Rexxar and Jaina standing side by side, which is a bit weird because Rexxar specifically reappeared in BFA because he was hunting Jaina with the aim of killing her, but that's obviously changed off screen somewhere because they're totes pals now, and that's great, isn't it? And Eyetrig has made it too, which will be important later. And when Zappy Boy asks,
So, what are we doing?
because he's a total dweeb, Saurfang takes a deep intake of breath, steeling himself for the path he is about to commit to.
Breaking the cycle.
Now, of course, the cycle Saurfang is referring to here is the oft-quoted cycle of hatred that exists perpetually between the Horde and Alliance. It's the name of a 2006 Warcraft novel set just before World of Warcraft starts, and starring characters that we find here, Jaina, Thrall, Rexxar, Rokan, and that cycle of hatred has been present ever since, throughout the whole life of this 15-year-old game. I feel it's one of the reasons that this, and in particular the next cinematic, reference so many other old cinematics and moments from Warcraft history. This idea of the cycle repeating itself again and again. And of course, Sylvanas herself talks about it in the BFA intro cinematic.
Ours is a cycle of hatred.
But this is her philosophy, her path, her Horde. And the traitors assembled here are determined to break that cycle and bring in a new future for the Horde and Alliance, but most importantly, for Azeroth. What happens next, of course, is the scenario itself, which we are going to take a quick look at here because the events of the war campaign before and after do add their own context to the next cinematic, which I've been told Blizzard have been calling Reckoning in-house. And perhaps most pleasingly for me, those choices that Horde players have been asked to make throughout the war campaign on whether to side with Saurfang and Bane or totally dob them into Nathanos and stay a Sylvanas loyalist really bear fruit, as not only do loyalists have a complete different set of missions to complete, but a unique and quite important cutscene at the end of it all. And you know, that's actually really awesome. I feel like that's an appropriate payoff and a really neat feature. So, Alliance and Traitor Horde players are sent to Razor Hill, where the two alive Sylvanas sisters, Alleria and Verisa, join proceedings and advise Anduin that since Sylvanas now commands the biggest army on Azeroth, it might be in everyone's best interests to let her take on N'Zoth herself, an idea which both Anduin and Saurfang reject, probably very wisely, as it turns out. We also learn here, by the way, that Tyrande is totally not answering Anduin's calls since Darkshore. It might be worth remembering that, I suspect. We bust our way through collapsed rocks and loyalist forces and take our place on the front lines outside Orgrimmar, where we pass orders on from Saurfang and Anduin to the various other commanders. Jaina and Thalyssera have a really cute exchange exchange about magic, where Thalyssera is desperate to learn the secrets of Jaina's flying psychological ghost galleon and arcane cannons, a Kultiran trade secret. Lorthamar and Chandris reflect on the fact that they are, like, seriously, really old and have seen much of this before. Melia is sent to guard Thunderbluff, where Bane is getting his wounds tended by G. Firepaw. But my favourite bit of NPC dialogue is these two lowly orc soldiers in Razor Hill. Feels strange laying siege to our own city. Second time for me, fought beside the Alliance back then too. Veteran traitor, huh? I've never betrayed the Horde. That's why I'm here. Actually, this is something I think the patch does really well. After the battle, there are NPCs all throughout Stormwind, Bralis, Orgrimmar, and Dazara lore having new exchanges about what happened and giving loads of different opinions and reactions. It's not just cool, it's important for understanding the way an in-game world like this evolves and changes with the events that we often kickstart and get involved with. I'm not going to talk about them all now, but it's definitely something we might examine closer in a future video. Meanwhile, loyalist players are summoned by Sylvanas and told to help put the city on lockdown, beginning with the arrest of Eitrig, because he's a dirty, lowly traitor. And no, Eitrig, we totally haven't forgotten that you turned up to the Traitors Assemble party in just your pants. You've got some questions to answer, chum. And I've got to admit, as a loyalist, it is quite satisfying to clap the old orc in irons and then parade him through the streets of Orgrimmar, shouting, shame, shame. I mean, we all did that, yeah? We all shouted shame as we did that. We burn some pro-rebellion propaganda, kill some rebels, and issue orders to Gayara and Gallywix, and don a disguise to try and sabotage the Rebel and Alliance war machines before taking our position on the battlements to watch as it all goes down. Which brings us to Reckoning, one of the longest, coolest, and most important cinematics. And if you think this is all a bit Siege of Orgrimmar 2.0 right now, then I don't blame you. Obviously, we are literally sieging Orgrimmar, but honestly, that also means that you're missing some pretty straight up and explicit parallels here, because this is no Siege 2.0, fam. This is the Wrathgate. The opening shot is of our main man, Saurfang, flanked by Anduin and Thrall. We have faction leaders past, present, and, if all goes according to plan here, future, walking towards their destiny. The instantly recognisable Orgrimmar musical theme blasts out at us as we get this stunning shot of the gates of the city. And you know my kink is to try and find these places in-game. I'm pretty sure that this is the gates of Orgrimmar. I'm pretty sure that's it. And honestly, has Orgrimmar ever looked more spiky and more badass than this? Looking at this shot, it's impossible not to think of the BFA opening cinematic here and the gates of Lordaeron. Here is another Horde city, the Horde city, preparing itself against an approaching army. But whereas that force was a vengeful Alliance army, here, the blue and red stand together, united in a common cause. How things have changed since the beginning of the war. Something I find really interesting is how this whole war has been represented to us as one day, in a way. Teldrassil was burned at night before Old Soldier saw Saurfang on the very dawn of war, while Lost Honor and especially Safe Haven took place in blazing midday sunlight. And here we are, in the final act, the sun now setting on the day, on the story, and on the war. As Saurfang looks up at the impenetrable walls, he expresses regret that many of the Horde of Orgrimmar, who are still Horde, will die.
Those who defend Orgrimmar are Horde as well. Our brothers and sisters.
Oh, and by the way, a note about Thrall here. In the missions leading up to this, Gen Greymane gets sent to guard the west gate of Orgrimmar, and when that happened, I was all like, aha, I bet that's so they don't have to bother animating his really annoying fur in the cinematic, because I bet that is a right pain in the ass to animate. I am totally IQ 300 cinematic analysis man. But then Thrall rocks up wearing a super detailed and beautifully rendered wolf pelt on his shoulders and kind of blew my genius theory out of the water. So thanks, Thrall. And also, seriously, are you not like really warm under that, mate? And as Sweaty Thrall is saying very seriously, yeah, Saurfang, but it's war, people is gonna die, like, Saurfang makes a decision that maybe sums up his character better than anything else.
Or perhaps just one. Sylvanas Windrunner!
Because he is not like Thrall. He never abandoned the Horde and hid away. He never forgot his responsibility to every single member of his faction. And if there is the slightest chance that he can save the lives of those on both sides, then that is a chance he's willing to take.
I challenge Makora!
He is so, what's the word? Honourable, right? And as Saurfang stands in front of the gate and bellows his challenge to Sylvanas, his facial expressions are obviously reminiscent of the BFA cinematic again, as he shouts for the Horde, lustfully throwing his body into combat at his Warchief's rallying cry. This moment could not be more different though. This is a cry in defiance of that same Warchief, a challenge to one-on-one combat. It's also, of course, quite a lot like the Wrathgate cinematic, as Bolvar and, yes, young Saurfang stand outside the gates of Icecrown with a combined Horde and Alliance army and demand that he face them to answer for his crimes. And honestly, if you don't think the way the gates open and Sylvanas steps into the light is a direct callback to that cinematic, then I don't know what to tell you. What difference is there between you and the Lich King now? Garrosh asked the Banshee in Silverpine many years ago. Isn't it obvious? She replied. I serve the Horde. Well, that was then. Now, the Horde serves Sylvanas. So what's the difference now? I absolutely love how Sylvanas steps into focus here. A character that many have complained has been apart from a lot of the action this expansion, despite her overshadowing presence, tantalizingly distant and just out of reach and unknowable, stepping into focus for this showdown. It's really good. And with these cinematics, you can't just say, oh, the animation here is really good every time that there's some good animation, because you'd never stop. But Sylvanas' facial expressions in this whole film are just exquisitely rendered and deserve to be highlighted, I think. And as she closes her literally ironclad fist, the Iron Fist obviously being symbolically most often associated with cruel dictatorships, in preparation to crush this rebellion, is it me? Or are there faint whispers emanating from the dark energy swirling around that Iron Fist?
A traitor leading traitors.
I love how this shot is framed with the Alliance army behind Anduin and the Horde troops behind Thrall, and an orc and a blue-skinned elf facing off in a sun-setting Durotar. Where have we seen that before? The original WoW trailer, back at the very start, the cycle of hatred repeating itself once again, and it's that hatred that Saurfang plays on to convince Sylvanas to take up the challenge.
Why should I accept your challenge?
You want to make me suffer.
And look, she doesn't even care that she's getting played here. The faint smile on her lips showing that, yeah, that's exactly what she wants. And you know, maybe that is Sylvanas' weakness. Her cruelty, as she signals her standard bearer, hereafter referred to by her rightful name of Banner Bay, to formally accept. As Banner Bay hands Sylvanas her daggers, not Xalatath, as some people think. Who knows where that thing is right now? It seems that she was very prepared for all of this. Maybe she expected it. And by the way, I love how Saurfang has rocked up to this battle unarmed. I mean, I know his unarmed skill probably is maxed out because he's been about since vanilla, but still, that is ballsy. Thrall gives him his new axe that he only just made on the ground and warns him.
Brother, you cannot win.
But as Saurfang explains with another fatherly shoulder grab, it's not about winning. It's about not hiding, about being seen and forcing Sylvanas to be seen, as we shall see. Saurfang still spitting out straight facts and life lessons here right at the very end.
I set you on this path.
And these, well, what feel like goodbyes, continue as Anduin steps up and symbolically hands Saurfang Charlemagne, an iconic weapon wielded by 2 generations of Alliance kings. Anduin lends it to the old orc for protection. He wasn't there to help his own father in his final battle on the Broken Shore. Maybe he can have some influence here. And Saurfang recognizes the importance of this, nods in appreciation, and then my favourite moment in this whole cinematic, as Saurfang steps almost heavily, resigned, wearily out of frame, Zappy Boy comes running into shot, young, quick, scared. Every exit is also an entrance, after all, as the older generation walk off stage, so the youth is ready to enter. Also, the look of helplessness on Zekhan's face here is heartbreaking, and I can't even. Almost under his breath, Saurfang says,
"Let it be finished. Let it be finished!"
The same words his own son, Dranosh Saurfang, uttered as he charged Arthas at the Wrathgate. And no spoilers, but we know how that ended for him, even if we haven't seen the Wrathgate, because we were reminded in Old Soldier. And so this climactic battle begins. And okay, when I was in drama school, I had this amazing fight teacher who always said there should never be a fight in a play or a film just because fights are cool, although they are cool. They should tell a story, and the fight itself should be able to tell that story without any extra dialogue, and that is exactly what happens here. As Saurfang goes all in for a straight execute, Sylvanas amazingly, impossibly blocks the giant orc's swing with a single dagger. And seriously, the amount of comments that I've read criticizing this that said things like, "Oh, that is totally unbelievable. There is no way that Sylvanas should be that strong. This is terrible writing." But fam, that is exactly the point. She shouldn't be that strong. The fact that she is not just a surprise, it's a reveal. As she looks up and smiles, it's the acknowledgement she knows something that we don't. She knows where this strength, where this power is coming from. We don't. And in a fight to the death between two characters, that is suddenly a very unnerving revelation to see. And indeed, the Banshee Queen then proceeds to basically effortlessly kick Saurfang's ass, just as Thrall had predicted, but like more so with these cool shadowy blades. To me, it brought to mind the fight in Troy with its overhead shots, or Rob Roy, where the more nimble Tim Roth is essentially just dancing around the more powerful Liam Neeson. And this might just be a trick of the brilliant animation, but as Sylvanas casually kneels to the prone Saurfang's level, there seems to be a genuine hurt on her face as she says,
I trusted you.
I believe her. She trusted her best general to give his all for the Warchief. She trusted him to kill Malfurion when he was prone and dying, just like Saurfang is now. This time, she'll make sure she finishes the job herself, but not before making him suffer as much as possible, telling him that he let down all of the rebels that believed in him, just as he did her. And again, her cruelty is her weakness, because as she says,
And so did they.
Saurfang looks at Zekhan, and he knows that Sylvanas is wrong. As he looks at the young troll who rescued him from the darkness on the eve of the battle for Lordaeron, Saurfang knows that hope doesn't die, that the new generation brings with it a whole new energy, a new moral integrity and righteousness. Saurfang has seen the future of the Horde, and he knows that it is good. And thus begins his final triumphant tirade.
You cannot kill hope. You tried at Teldrassil. You failed. Hope remains. You set us to kill each other at Lordaeron. You failed.
And as he speaks his truth, Sylvanas' smile turns into a hateful grimace, and his blows seem to carry more weight. I mean, yes, he's just respect on the fly from fury to arms, but more than that, he is now fighting with the certainty that whatever happens here, the Horde is already the winner. As he fights, you see the banners of the Horde and Alliance at his back. He is fighting for both of those factions right now. Behind Sylvanas is only the flag of the Forsaken. She is fighting for herself.
You just keep failing. The Horde will endure. The Horde is strong.
And as Sylvanas parries another of his blows, this outrageous moment where Charlemagne splits. Oh, and you know what? I never noticed that the two parts of Charlemagne have a red and blue crystal on them. Ha, fitting. And allows the orc to land a crucial, game-changing hit on the Banshee, slashing her eye, releasing weird purple Banshee smoke and the glowing red of her eyes, but also, more importantly, using up the very last of Sylvanas' Fs. She now has no more Fs. She is F-less. The field on which she grows her Fs is barren, and she is 100% done with these fools. Not for the first time, she becomes somewhat impulsive. And as we've seen from Warcraft 3 through Cataclysm, and especially in BFA, when Sylvanas gets angry and impulsive, she gets spiteful.
The Horde is nothing!
Her cruelty is her weakness. There's this beautiful moment of silence before Banner Bay enters the dizzying world of Warcraft meme immortality with this glorious side-eye. A side-eye which tells us so much about the way attitudes towards the Warchief are about to change. A sentiment that Sylvanas doesn't miss. And I hope you're paying attention, fam, because all cards are about to be played.
You are all nothing!
As Sylvanas draws herself to her full height above the camera so we get a good view of her own troops in shot. And by the way, I can't have been the only one here as the music built scarily who thought, oh shit, is she about to turn into like an old god or something? She doesn't. But this shot is of course reminiscent of how in the BFA opening she stands up from her dark banshee swirl and yells, for the Horde! But of course this time she is denouncing the Horde, because I don't know if you noticed, but she is 100% done. Her F count is 0. Her almost blasphemous words echo symbolically around Orgrimmar, and Saurfang, injured, dying, beaten, looks up triumphantly. Because he just won. We don't get to hide, he said to Thrall. Well, neither does Sylvanas anymore. Her truth is out, in the open, and that, of course, was the whole point all along. Much like in the Warcraft movie, where Duratam fights a battle he can't possibly win against Gul'dan to expose him for what he is, so Sylvanas is now exposed. Her true feelings for the Horde laid bare. And speaking of Gul'dan, when Varian last held Charlemagne and faced off against him on the Broken Shore, Varian's last words were, for the Alliance, before this happened. Here, Saurfang, who committed so many atrocities in the name of the Horde that Gul'dan helped create with the demon's blood, who lost his home planet, who found redemption in Thrall's Horde, and who at this moment may just have won that Horde back again, says something bigger, more important, free of the factions and their cycle of hatred before meeting an almost identical end. This time purple blown up instead of green blown up, because seriously, Sylvanas can do that now. Like I say, that's what we're supposed to think. Of course, that day on the Broken Shore, Sylvanas did not let the Horde die by sounding the retreat. Today, it's possible that she saves the Horde again by retreating again. There's just time for one last FU from Sylvanas. Oh, she did have one F left after all.
Savor it. Nothing lasts.
Before she flies off in her Banshee form. And again, this is a part of the cinematic which has met with some serious criticism and eye-rolling, like it's somehow come out of nowhere. But I mean, when she did the exact same thing in the BFA intro cinematic, we all thought it was super cool, because it really was. When she used it to escape her own Blight Bomb trap in the Battle of Lordaeron cinematic, we saw that it could get her out of sticky situations. I don't really see what's different about this time that makes it so bad, to be honest, but I guess I'm just a shill or whatever. And this is our final callback to the Wrathgate. Just as Arthas bowled out of Icecrown, killed a Saurfang, and then got caught out and had to F off again, so does Sylvanas. But Orgrimmar is no longer a safe haven, forcing her to go her own way. Some would say, at last, after 15 years. And so, to Saurfang. As he lies in this patch of blasted land, I was reminded of the ground around the Dark Portal, which is where he and his bloodthirsty Horde first entered this world in Warcraft 1. And as his motif plays and Zekhan runs to his side, only to recoil when he realizes his hero and friend really has died, he tenderly touches his chest, like Saurfang does to him in Old Soldier. And yes, it's cliche, yes, it's cheesy, but it's been earned over the last year or so of storytelling.
What do we do now?
We bring him home.
And Anduin, the king of the Alliance, stoops down to pick up this most iconic of Horde warriors, just as Varian allowed Saurfang to carry away his own dead son at Icecrown. Thrall, the first orc born on Azeroth, cups the back of his head and lifts him onto his shoulders, and Banner Bay makes her choice. To signal the opening of the gates, growing into a chorus of, as a sign of respect for the legend passing through, back to where he belongs. And as the golden sun continues to set on this scene, it represents so much. The sun sets on Saurfang's life, yes, and the warrior's honourable death that he finally found, but not on his legacy, which will live on in the new Horde, the Horde he has now helped found with his sacrifice. The sun sets on the war campaign and the Fourth War, which arguably began with the start of World of Warcraft 15 years ago. Maybe the sun is also setting on the outright hostilities between the Horde and Alliance, as side by side, bearing the old soldier aloft, we see Anduin, perhaps moving out of his father's shadow finally to win his own war. Zekhan, the heart of the new Horde and what it stands for, looking nervous for what the future might hold. And Thrall, inspired and steeled by Saurfang's sacrifice for the home he created, determined that it won't be in vain. The sun is setting on this story, and after comes the dawn, a new day, hope. But of course before dawn comes the night. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the Fourth War. Now there's also Saurfang's funeral and that nice moment between Jaina and Thrall and the loyalist cutscene where Sylvanas kind of reveals her plan, but also kind of asks more questions than it answers, and that really great new NPC lines in the capitals. But this video is already super long, so these are things we'll look at separately later, I think. I do though, however, have a couple of things I'd like to ponder, some questions I'd like to raise. Number one, is this really the breaking of the circle? Does the end of the Fourth War really signal the end of hostilities between the Horde and Alliance? And if so, what does that mean for the game? Are we going to see the end of Horde and Alliance? No, I don't think so. The game isn't just built on the two factions philosophically, but mechanically as well. I think it would be an almost impossible, just logistically, to do away with Horde and Alliance in-game, but there's no doubt that the relationship between the two is set to take a different tone, at least for the time being. Anduin is all about peace, as is Jaina. Even Gen doesn't really care about the Horde now his main prey Sylvanas has left it. And in the Horde leadership stand Bane, Anduin's bestie and Horngiver, Thrall and Lorthamar, none of whom seem to want to fight anymore. What I think we might see in coming expansions is the retaining of Horde and Alliance, but a relaxing on the faction-locked nature of at least some of its races. So Forsaken all over again now by Sylvanas, would be able to choose between Horde and Alliance, for example. Kalia and Derek already seeming to be getting set up as race leaders on that side, with Lillian Voss seemingly ready to step up as leader of the Forsaken remaining in the Horde. I see no reason why Void Elves couldn't play for either faction, or Tauren, or Dark Iron Dwarves, or, to be honest, even Draenei. They're a very forgiving sort, you know, the Draenei. They're very noble. And this would allow War Mode to still exist, and PvP battlegrounds and arenas and stuff, but relegates them to skirmish status, makes the Horde and Alliance animosity much less of a focal point going forward. And as we said way back at the very beginning of BFA, I feel in the big faction war expansion, there has to be some fundamental way that the factions change at the end of it. And this solution would seem pretty fitting to me. The second question though is, whose power is Sylvanas using? This cinematic may have tied up a story, but this is the big question that it asks. How is she so strong, and how did she get so strong? It's easy to assume that she's using the Void or Shadow Magic. We know Dark Rangers do use Shadow Magic after all. And look, I'm not being funny, but when I see big black smoky shadow smoke things like this, I think, Shadow Magic. And I also think of the big cloudy Shadow N'Zoth, and I think, uh-oh, so does that mean Sylvanas is now a servant of the old gods? Is that where she got her new power? Well, the game would suggest not. In dialogue between Jaina, Thalyssra and Lorthamar after the battle, Jaina asks, what manner of magic did Sylvanas use against Saurfang? And Thalyssra says, it was unlike any magic I have ever encountered. I could sense none of it. Which is weird, isn't it? Because shadow magic is not uncommon in WoW, and Thalyssra would certainly recognize it. So, not shadow? And Sylvanas reveals in that loyalist cutscene that she is in fact not working for or with N'Zoth, beyond being happy that he's going to kill a lot of people. In fact, killing as many people as possible seems to be her main motivation in all of this. So is that unknown magic death magic? Well, that would seem to make the most sense, although we've encountered quite a lot of that in BFA too, and the colour scheme established for it is light blue and grey. generally, rather than shadow black and purple. But I get that these pre-rendered cinematics don't always show everything as it appears in-game. That's kind of the point. Could this be something entirely new that we are yet to learn about? She mentions the Hungering Darkness, and the only item in the whole game that has that in the name is the Hood of Hungering Darkness, used by members of the Shadow Council, which is one of the old cash shop items. So whatever it is, it's really evil, you know? Little cash shop joke there. Also, was there any significance on the clear parallels between Reckoning and the Wrathgate cinematics? I mean, the symbolism of Saurfang dying in much the same way as his son, a warrior's death, of course. But is Blizzard trying to hint at something by so obviously casting Sylvanas as Arthas in this? I don't think we'll have to wait too long to find out, but one thing is certain: if the future of World of Warcraft comes with a Lich Queen, then basically, yes. Yes and yes. Sign me the heck up, please. Yes, please, yes. I told you it was going to be a long one today, and I apologise, but what do you guys think? Was it a satisfying end to the war campaign? Did the cinematics give you the closure that you wanted? Who will be the new Horde Warchief? What will happen with the Horde and Alliance from now on? And who is the dark power behind Sylvanas? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this video, don't thank us. Thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all our stuff happen. And it's true, without you guys, there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin Evitel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Chris Rock. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.